Lando Norris has received a lot of backlash after last weekend, and some might say it's even warranted, as he was the one claiming only a couple of years ago that Hamilton should win every race due to having the fastest car. But now, for the first time, Norris is experiencing himself what it's like to have the fastest car. And suddenly, it has become clear to him that just having a fast car isn't enough. But what does this mean for his title chances? And more importantly, what's the backlash all about? Is it justified? Norris himself stated that driving like a muppet at the start of the Formula One United States Grand Prix resulted in the heated clash with Max Verstappen at the start and later on in the closing stages of the race. The Red Bull driver launched an attack up the inside of Norris into the first turn, driving both wide and allowing Charles Leclerc to take the lead on his route to a comfortable victory. While Verstappen's action may have resulted in consequences due to its forcefulness, the fact that it occurred on lap 1 meant the race stewards disregarded the claim. When the two met again at the end of the race, with Norris attempting to claim the final podium slot, the three-time champion pushed his title challenger wide, and although both sliding off track, the McLaren was punished for leaving the track and gaining an advantage. While considerable criticism was aimed at the decision after the race, Norris held his hands up for allowing Verstappen to attack into the first corner, resulting in the late race struggle. Turn 1. I didn't do the correct thing, but I feel like what happened at the end of the race was more on my side. Otherwise, it was a good battle, and I enjoyed it. We just didn't come out on top because I didn't do a good enough job. If I defended better in turn 1 and wasn't driving like a muppet, then I should have led after turn 1, and we shouldn't have this conversation in the first place. Andrea Stella, McLaren team principal, was cautious not to target his fury at Verstappen in his post-race statements, instead emphasizing his dissatisfaction with the stewards and the status of F1's rules. Norris was also full of respect for his rival, insisting, "I think Max drove very well. It's very hard to do what we're doing, and it's hard when you're side by side. You're completely one side of the track to guess where your braking marker is. You're going quicker than you have before because you use the battery, the tyres are older, there's different bumps, there's a lot of dirt, we're battling and fighting hard. So I respect the battle that we had. It was a good one, it was enjoyable, I think it was respectful." However, somewhere, you have to feel bad for Lando Norris. He's in a dreadful situation. He has an outside chance of winning the Formula One World Championship for the first time. To accomplish so, he must continuously outscore Max Verstappen by an absurd number of points. At the same time, Verstappen is almost bullying Norris every time they race on the circuit. It happened repeatedly in Austria, to the point they made contact and both their races were ruined. Lando's more ruined than Max's. But Norris got a sense of how far Verstappen is willing to go to protect an important position at a critical time. At the Red Bull Ring, the race was for the lead, with proper high stakes. Round 2 took place in Austin, this time for a podium position behind the dominating Ferraris. Verstappen was at his uncompromising best again, as Norris was unable to find a clear pass. Regardless of who was in the right, Austin's Turn 12 altercation between Max Verstappen and Lando Norris left a bitter taste for Formula One. Rather than praising two great drivers fighting on the edge or Ferrari's remarkable 1-2 triumph, the post-US Grand Prix conversation went to regulations, stewarding consistency, and track boundaries. Verstappen followed F1's racing guidelines, but are they fit for purpose? The incident elicited contrasting reactions from both sides, with Red Bull claiming Norris performed an illegal overtake off the track, an allegation that the race stewards upheld, and McLaren arguing that drivers should not be permitted to just jam a competitor off the road. As Verstappen appears to have understood better than anyone else, the current driving standards guidelines encourage the defending car on the inside to simply release the brakes and ensure it is ahead at the apex, without giving the car on the outside any room at the exit. A line of thinking that makes overtaking around the outside even more difficult than it was before. Mercedes was outraged that Verstappen was not punished while George Russell was for a similar-looking offence of driving Valtteri Bottas off. But because the Mercedes driver was the attacker and overtook on the inside, the rules state that Russell was responsible for leaving a car's width for the Sauber at the exit. Interestingly, the requirements are only given from the attacking car's perspective, including the obligation to drive in a safe and controlled way and to complete the corner inside the track limits. The fact that Verstappen did not do so contributed to Norris receiving just a 5-second penalty rather than a 10-second penalty, and it also explains why Norris was not penalised for his 4th track limits offence. Then, there's another interpretation for the first lap of a race, in which stewards take a far more casual, let-them-race attitude. That means drivers are less scared to go at each other at turn 1 for fear of being punished, but it also makes it difficult for viewers to determine where the consistency is. It is evident that the rules are just suggestive of how the stewards may assess a specific situation. They allow for diverse interpretations, as Red Bull and McLaren did in this occasion. Those criteria are expected to be widely adopted across all levels of FIA-sanctioned racing in 2025, including grassroots racing, but are now set to return to the agenda as a topic of discussion. But what if in future cases, the guidelines allowed the attacking car to stay ahead when being forced off? Will we witness more wheel-to-wheel racing inside the white lines rather than outside? That is a matter for F1 and the FIA to solve in the coming months before the guidelines become part of the FIA's overall strategy. However, many people believe the existing method is too complicated and subject to interpretation, and therefore does not necessarily encourage fair racing. McLaren also complained that the FIA stewards decided to punish Norris within a few minutes of the race's completion. Team principal Andrea Stella said this meant the stewards couldn't consider what both drivers and teams had to say about the situation. When the case is so difficult, like Lando and Max, just take the time, review it after the race, and hear from the drivers. Try to understand the subtleties, he said. The FIA and F1 want to guarantee that the appropriate driver is on the podium. Therefore, rapid decision-making has a greater impact on cars finishing at the front. Having a driver take the prize only to be penalised and relegated hours later is an undesirable result. Thus, stewards are empowered to make a quick judgment if they believe the case is clear enough. So, while issues will be made about regulations and officiating consistency, removing the choice out of the hands of stewards and allowing the track to define its own natural bounds is the solution that has been right under our noses all along. The big question is if we will ever see this solution come to light. After all, we all know that the FIA loves having their power, so will they ever give up on that? It seems that making the overtaking rulebook a bit smaller would be the perfect solution. At this point, the difference between defending and attacking is too much, which can create situations like we saw last weekend. What do you think? Does the rulebook need changes? And more importantly, is Norris performing underwhelming now that he's been driving the best car for over 15 races? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below.